Chapter 5 just got some updates from the devs themselves in a new interview teasing how development is going with the chapter and even future Poppy games, along with a bunch of new behind the scenes, what might be some scrapped characters from Chapter 4 revealed, and a bunch of other cool things. Make sure to subscribe to not miss any other future news and like the video so it gets shared to more people, but let's get right into it. So firstly, starting off with new Chapter 4 behind the scenes, recently we got a couple of animations of Yarnaby. One from Malachi here showing Yarnaby's stalking cycle in the flesh, which like all the others has no yarn, making it look super derpy. And also this one from Taylor showing what is supposedly a separate unused animation of Yarnaby moving around. In this shot from Malachi, we got to see an unused Poppy walk cycle where she would lift her dress up and walk, giving her a bit more life. Although unfortunately this wouldn't end up being used as they had to adjust her rig, making it obsolete. Speaking of animations though, creator Alex Santel uploaded a ton of animations, including 2 more of Yarnaby moving around. One of Yarnaby's jump scare, although I definitely wouldn't call it scary without the yarn. One of Yarnaby's chase and death scene where he gets caught up on the hook and falls down, although in this one he doesn't catch on fire like in the final. There's one of Huggy Wuggy slamming on the window in Chapter 4's ending, who in this model actually just has his body parts tied up instead of having bandages shoved in the wounds in the final version. Various different looks at Doey's final animations in development, along with one more of Doey here that went unused, of him sneaking up on the player before a bunch of rocks drop on him, blocking his path in what appears to be the mine area, which is actually super interesting because in the final game, after we complete this area, Doey panically confronts us saying that he lost the prototype but didn't explain why or where he went. And it seems originally the reason was because he was trying to watch us on our journey suspiciously, and that's how the prototype got out of his sight and into the safe haven. But where things start to get a bit more interesting is the concept artist Benjamin Yim posted a ton of early concept art for the games, giving us looks into old designs and even characters originally planned. First off, we're given a ton of concept art for the various different areas throughout the game, like the train station, Doey's crush scene, the prison yard, the generator systems in the safe haven, among many other cool ones I'm not going to talk about in this video, but I've put on screen if you want to see them. However, what I found interesting is going to this piece, we see a concept for the prison office area found in Chapter 4, with it fundamentally looking similar to the final version. However, if we look over at the right, we can see that we're going to be pictures of a bunch of experiments like Huggy, Catnap, Daisy, even what appears to be Killy Willy, a fan character that I guess they just put here for fun. But most interestingly, in the middle is some kind of purple creature we have never seen before. Now, it's possible this could be a new character or a scrapped character, although the most common consensus is that this is likely a very early version of Doey the Doughman, since if we look close, it at least is in the same general shape of Doey and has multiple colors like Doey has. I even think we see the blue hat here at the top, and the devs had previously told us that Doey went through like 100 different designs, so it wouldn't shock me if they just pulled a random one and put it here for this concept. Another interesting concept we saw was this one of the prison lobby, looking pretty similar to the early screenshots we've seen before, but also for whatever reason, the symbols' colors are in a different order. I'm not exactly sure why, but I've mentioned multiple times that the logo looked like it was meant to be paying ode to Boxy Boo, the original experiment, with its colors and shape. However, this may suggest there wasn't any meaning behind the colors outside of them being the Playtime Co colors, and it was just a pure coincidence. Then finally, we got various different sketches for the doctor section here and how his final station would have looked, along with a bunch of different other areas around this location. And then we got this fully rendered concept art for the Doey boss fight, complete with the saws, tons of dead toys, and even again seemingly various unreleased toys, specifically multiple different teddy bears, one here, another here, and one more here. Now, I haven't seen too many people talk about what these are and why they exist. It's again possible that these could be scrapped side characters they were planning before being shoved to the side, although on the other hand, it's also possible these were just meant to be filler toys that they put here to make concept art while they were still developing all of the characters in the game. Regardless though, it is definitely a super weird design choice. Moving on to some unused content, YouTuber Tetrabit Gaming last week dropped a new video going deep into a bunch of unused stuff in the actual final game, which is another super good video if you want to see cut voice lines and areas and whatnot. Although the main things I thought were interesting were, one, he found a second unused version of the Doey the Doughman intro VHS tape that has a bunch of different changes, like different filters, different audios.
I knew it! This is the one I wanted! I knew it! This is the one I wanted!
and even an uncensored version of Jack falling into the doughy-dough, which, along with them choosing to censor Huggy's wounds with bandages that we talked about earlier, it makes me wonder if they ended up censoring these things for rating reasons and didn't want it to be too violent so it could still be rated teen and not M for mature. Tetra also found this arm thing here out of bounds with a keyhole at the end of it, which a lot of people believe might have been the Jester character, if you don't remember, that was mysteriously teased in the Chapter 4 ARG that never appeared in the game, judged from its design looking, well, like a Jester's arm, which is really interesting, especially since it felt like the devs teased and cut other big things like the Doctor's boss fight in the trailer, who looked like he was going to be one standalone Harley Sawyer bot backed up by previous concept arts before being changed to the multiple minions. So it wouldn't shock me if they accidentally teased too early that we were supposed to fight a Jester in this chapter, and when they died, their arm would fall off, revealing a key to progress through the game. But moving on from behind the scenes, for Chapter 4's release, there was recently a Japan pop-up shop that held a bunch of merch and even some Chapter 4 souvenirs, but more interestingly, also had a ton of art, including a full-sized withered Huggy plush, and also unseen art for every single Nightmare critter, which Mob provided me with the digital versions of here that they literally never used in the game despite being fully finished. I am assuming these were probably meant to be for some cardboard cutouts, but they were just never implemented. Plus, in this screenshot, we can even see more concept art in the background for the prison here, which was originally going to have the name The Shelf, and also appears to have even more of those weird teddy bears up here. And speaking of weird, in previous videos, I've discussed how the devs have teased working on new games and projects, which they've been saying for a long time now, but we are still yet to see any of these games in any way. At least, I think, possibly until now. Because going over onto Mob's LinkedIn, we've actually started to see job listings for 2D pixel artists that specifically can work in game engines to build immersive and cohesive game worlds, which could be for something like an arcade minigame or something for Poppy, kind of like what FNAF has done numerous times in the past, for instance, or it could suggest a 2D pixel game could be their next big project they've been talking about. I don't know, but comment down below what you think, and regardless, this at least suggests they are hiring and building a team to create whatever this is, suggesting it's currently in pre-development, which still makes me wonder what happened to Project Playtime. Moving on to some dev updates, recently YouTuber Nized announced he was going to be doing an interview with the voice actor of the Dr. Baldwin Williams, which I'm sure will be interesting. Creator Tibbers also did an interview with Baldwin going into his thoughts and behind the scenes on the role. Nothing too big reveals wise, but was some fun perspective to say the least. However, on the topic of interviews, most importantly of all, we got our first major interview with the developers talking about Chapter 5 and a bit more, as Dot Esports recently dropped an article where they talked with the CEO and CCO Zach and Seth Bellinger talking about Poppy Playtime. Now, this interview is really weirdly written and cryptic, but to break it down in the best way possible, first they discussed Chapter 4 retrospectively, saying, Chapter 4's development began before the launch of Chapter 3. Both Zach and Seth described the process of making new experiments. Zach said they have to feel like they were once part of the toy factory before turning into something more sinister, also saying they have seen thousands of fan-made art, theories, and videos like the one you're watching right now. Later on, they then discussed Huggy's return and how it was always planned from the start, even mentioning the different teases they gave us throughout the past chapters to his return. But more interestingly, they discussed the much different and controversial gameplay of Chapter 4 that still to this day has been criticized as being a big downgrade from Chapter 3, where they said every chapter is uniquely crafted as a standalone product that fits into an overarching narrative. Concepts like new GrabPack hands, experiments, and gameplay mechanics like moving away from platforming are chosen based on the flow of gameplay and storytelling, which seems like it's essentially them confirming something I suspected for a while, that Chapter 4 was meant to be a slower moving chapter, so there was less bouncing and swinging around the factory platforming wise, something I don't know if I enjoy about the chapter, but it's interesting that this was an intentional decision and not something that was done due to time constraints or anything. But now, regarding Chapter 5, the devs gave us a couple very interesting clues. First, when asked if Chapter 5 was going to be the conclusion to the series, they said, fans have a lot to look forward to as, quote, many questions are, quote, left unanswered in the series, with, quote, plenty of stories and lore to reveal. Unable to share what's in the works for Chapter 5, we have confirmation that, quote, a lot of ideas and concepts are already in the works for the future, and are, quote, exciting. So there's a lot of quotes between the writer and the developers, but it at least seems like here they are again confirming there is no slowing down on the game's development and are actively conceptualizing what we're going to end up seeing in Chapter 5. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if they started doing that before Chapter 4 was even done. So that's some pretty exciting minor updates. And then towards the end of the article, they say, as Mob has plans for the future of Poppy Playtime, this doesn't mean Chapter 5 is the only product on the horizon. Zach said the team, quote, never wants to close the door on opportunity, suggesting the future is big, bright, and full of lore, which again is super cryptic because the way the article is titled, it suggests the series may exceed Chapter 5, but they don't specifically specify whether that means they are wanting to do something like a Chapter 6, or if they just meant doing things like Poppy spin-offs and maybe even an eventual sequel. I'm not exactly sure, and they didn't release the full interview in question to help us clarify, but that's our first interview for Chapter 5. Maybe at some point I'll try to interview Zach himself again like I did for Chapter 4, so if you want that, let me know, and I'll see you guys next time.